been ejected from the game for gambling.
MLB investigators determined he was betting on baseball while managing the Reds.
我听到的声音跟画面是不一样的。等一下，我怕我是听到。等一下，我先把你们的声音。
The lifetime ban imposed by the league has blocked him from being inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown.
Because this is a complicated legacy, as complicated as any I've ever seen in sports.
After nearly 20 years of vehemently denying the allegations, Rose eventually admitted he did in fact bet on baseball and talked about it in the HBO documentary series Charlie Hustle and the Matter of Pete Rose.
You can say I didn't respect the game when I bet on it, and you're probably right. But however, up till that time, as far as playing the game, I played the game right.
With news of his death at 83 years old, fans of the Hit Kings gathering at the American Ballpark in Cincinnati, leaving roses in tribute to their beloved number 14.
How could you beat the Pete Rose slide? I mean, you have a slide named after you. That says something.
Hey, Jimmy Savannah, good morning to you. So Boeing is reportedly considering raising at least $10 billion by selling new shares of stock. Now, the company is looking to replenish its cash reserves that have been impacted further by the strike of more than 30,000 factory workers. A stock sale won't likely happen for about a month, assuming Boeing can resolve the strike and it can get a firm grasp and control of the lockout, which has halted production of a 737 MAX and other high-selling planes.
On-the-ground reporting and newsmaker interviews. Download the NBC News app now.
Democracy is happening now. We have a lot to get to on this historic night.
Things are happening here in Chicago.
Now, never stops.
They are energized by the idea that this is
Okay.
a real fight.
Fired up here.
Now
Thank you so much.
is where it counts.
Grab your cowboy hats.
Donald Trump wins in November.
Are younger people excited about this new Democratic ticket?
The
我现在
moment is
And
now.
we look at a story
The voice that
tradition.
really matters are the
I'll
voice of
have
the
you
voters.
say
News for the generation
hello
of now
and
is
但听到的声音不是
你们会进广，我们的进广告时间是不同步的。
Let's talk about the implications on women's health and then the political fallout. Start with what this law actually will
每天辩论会出现这个情
find alternate ways to ship. Small businesses, small importers, small manufacturers who might have goods on some of these ships out in the ocean, they're going to have a little bit of a tougher time. And the longer you go on, the more the backlog piles up and the harder it is to get back to where you need to be. So the time is a really important factor here to make sure this isn't a big hit to the economy, Vicki.
We'll be watching. Christine Rowan's out in New Jersey. Thank you so much. Let's keep it on your money now with our CNBC Money Minute. Stellantis recalling over 190,000 Jeep fire risks. The company is urging people to park outside and away from other cars until this issue is fixed. CNBC reporter Silvana Henao joins me now. Silvana, good to see you. So what else do drivers need to know about this recall?
Hey, Vicki, good afternoon. Well, Stellantis said that it's recalling, as you mentioned, Jeep Wranglers and Cherokee plug-in hybrid models from 2020 to 2024, and it's over a battery component after receiving 13 reports of fires that occurred when the vehicles were parked or turned off. The automaker estimates about 5% of the affected vehicles have the defect. Mexico said today it's buying tortilla chip maker Siete Foods for $1.2 billion in its first food acquisition in about 5 years. This says it adds healthier options to its portfolio, like recent additions Bear Snacks and Popcorners. The deal is expected to close next year pending regulatory approval, Vicki.
All right, Silvana Henao, thank you very much. Appreciate you. A man is now free after more than 20 years in prison for a murder he did not commit. The man exonerated after a Dateline special raised new questions in his case. We will have more on this incredible story. That's coming up next. You're watching NBC News Daily.
Automation of the cranes, the trucks, the gates at these ports.
Democracy is happening now.
They are energized by the idea that this is a real fight.
People were on their feet. Folks were fired up here.
The only voice that really matters are the voice of the voters. News for the generation of now is NBC News Now.
Closer to the Gaza border. A story of resilience and hope. Please take care of yourself and each other.
He spent 24 years behind bars and another 3 fighting to clear his name. But now John Adrian Velasquez, or JJ, is officially a free man. Yesterday, inside a Manhattan courtroom, a judge officially cleared him for a murder he did not commit. NBC News nightly anchor Lester Holt was there to witness the moment and talk with JJ about what all of this means to him.
It would be impossible to return to John Adrian Velasquez all that has been taken from him. In a Manhattan courtroom, a judge finally gave him back his good name, his decades-long cries for justice after being wrongfully convicted of killing a retired police officer, coming down to a 4-minute-long proceeding.
The people do not believe they are in a position to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt.
Without fanfare or apology, the judge formally accepting the conclusion of a Manhattan District Attorney's internal investigation, the same office that once helped put him in prison, that J.J. Velasquez investigation, the same office that once helped put him in prison, that J.J. Velasquez, as he is known, is an innocent man.
I am granting that application, so this matter is dismissed.
JJ's sat down with me for the first time untethered to the criminal justice, where he sat down with me for the first time untethered to the...
Well, maybe you don't appreciate how important that is.
Absolutely. I mean, when we're born, our name becomes our identity. And so when we're taken through the system, they strip you of your identity. They put you in a shower, butt naked, hose you down, they make a slave. And then they give you a number and brand you. And that wasn't who I was. And I've been fighting for 27 years to tell them that my name is John Adrian J.J. Velasquez.
Velasquez has been physically free since 2021, when then New York Governor Andrew Cuomo commuted his sentence, granting him parole but leaving him stained with the mark of a convicted felon.
I had curfew. I couldn't travel out of the state without permission. If I wanted to go on a date, I needed permission.
Also there to witness his exoneration, Dateline producer Dan Slepian, whose dogged 22-year pursuit of the truth in JJ's case began with a series of prison letters he received from JJ.
I can go on and on about this miscarriage of justice.
What did that mean to you to have someone listen to you?
Well, besides my mother, Dan's my hero. Everybody knows that. Like, if it wasn't for Dan, I'd still be sitting in the cage.
Well, Dan, every time we've talked about this story, you said you're not advocating for JJ. You're advocating for the truth. Did the truth prevail?
Yeah, the truth finally did prevail today, but frankly, everybody knew the truth for a very, very long time. And it took a long time for the court to finally recognize it.
The DA's review of JJ's conviction looked at several factors, including recanted eyewitness testimonies and DNA evidence. JJ's case, one of several wrongful conviction cases unearthed by Slepian, recounted in his book, The Sing Sing Files. It's the cases undiscovered that haunt both men.
You feel that you left a lot of innocent guys behind when you left prison?
I know I left a lot of innocent people behind.
It's that common?
It's very common.
Working on their behalf, JJ's mission as he moves forward and catches his breath for the first time in a very long time.
Does the world feel a little different now?
我觉得现在的延迟还能够，就是我还 OK 啦，但是2到3秒不一定。然后quality 就。
Our thanks to Lester Holt for that story. And Dan Slepian joins me now. He's an investigative producer with NBC's Dateline, and as you saw there, gave a big hug to JJ in that courtroom yesterday. Dan, it's good to have you here with me on. You saw Slepian gave a big hug to JJ in that courtroom yesterday. Dan, it's good to have you here with me on Daily. Talk to me about what it was like to be there in person.
I mean, it was a long time coming, you know. Being in the courtroom yesterday was incredibly emotional. But at the same time, while it was a moment of joy, it was also bittersweet. It was a long time coming. You know, the case against JJ was so weak. The evidence of his innocence was so obvious. So for me, it wasn't hard to be happy, but at the same time, I was very thoughtful about all of those years that he's lost, but also about how many other people that are similarly situated that don't have the attention that he has and that aren't going to get the justice that he saw yesterday.
Dan, you are known for your in-depth investigations into wrongful convictions. JJ sent you those letters that became part of a podcast. What do you think people would be surprised by about our justice system? And I think Lester was surprised in that interview when he, you know, JJ said, I've left left a lot of people, a lot of innocent people behind.
Right. What has shocked me over the years and still, believe it or not, continues to surprise me all these decades later, and what I think most people will be surprised about, is how unbelievably resistant the system is to correct its mistakes. It's not just occasional errors. It's not just, there are just a few people. These are systemic issues in which the system subtly and not so subtly encourages people with great responsibility to act irresponsibly in ways that affects people's lives without them even knowing it. When someone's convicted, there's finality. And when that burden shifts for you to prove you're innocent, you need a bolt of lightning to strike the courthouse door to get another day.
Or someone like Dan Sleppian on your side. Dan, we appreciate everything you've done, and thanks for being on the show. And the book is called Fancy Bias. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
J.D. Vance and Tim Walz set to face off tonight in a vice presidential debate. More ahead on Daily.
应该得就是那时候论跟
Recording in progress.
论跟 Google 声音，你们就是要随时切换，不然就是会有刚刚回应的问题。
等我一下，我查查。
我丢新的链接进去。
好。
What is going to happen now?
Going back and forth because they...
Go ahead. This is it.
News lives in the now.
The front lines are still very active. This is like quicksand, and officials say an entire town is cut off.
This close to actually understand why people had to jump in the ocean.
News for the generation of now is NBC News Now.
Kristen Welker hosts Meet the Press every Sunday on NBC.
Recording in progress.
In Minneapolis, there is a different kind of crime-fighting organization hitting the streets to try and keep kids out of trouble. It is called Somali Youth Link, and it is made up of people from Somalia who migrated to the city after fleeing their war-torn country. NBC News reporter Alex Tabbitt traveled there to see how it works.
Late at night in downtown Minneapolis, Somali refugees on the streets.
We patrol. We walk.
To stop crime in its tracks.
We are the quiet lion in the jungle, and we are watching things.
Somali Youth Link is a government-funded organization that deploys Somali elders to make sure youngsters stay out of trouble in the Twin Cities.
We want to say, hey, we're watching you. We are here to make sure you don't get into trouble. Safety for all.
Minnesota's long welcomed Somali refugees after a civil war broke out in the 90s.
We saw 2 rockets land, one in a crowded street, injuring at least a dozen people.
Plunging the East African country into starvation.
The face of Somalia. 4 million people face death from sickness, starvation, and war.
Since then, the Somali American population in Minnesota has risen to about 82,000 as Somalis find refuge in the land of 1,000 lakes. During the pandemic and years after,
we had some altercations and some crime incidents.
Incidents of Somali youth getting into trouble, including dozens arrested for shooting fireworks at police. That inspired Faria Khalif to start Somali Youth Link to work hand in hand with local police departments.
At times they'll come to us and say, hey, I think this is a police matter, can you deal with it? Hey, you're under arrest. Sir, you're under arrest. And vice versa, we'll go to the Somali Youth Link and say, I think this is not a police issue, this is a Somali youth issue, and we would like you to address it.
What makes SYL so effective?
In our culture, Somali culture, there is a respect to the elders.
A culture of respect and understanding. The city of Minneapolis granting the group a $300,000 contract.
We've learned our lesson from the horrendous murder of George Floyd.
Reforming the way the community interacts with law enforcement and protecting the refugee population in the midst of a rise of anti-immigrant rhetoric.
We understand the value of immigration, and personally growing up in that as a blue-collar kid, it's wonderful. It's what America is.
Alex Tabbitt, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
What a refreshing perspective. Well, in Virginia, some elementary school students are getting a lesson in culture thanks to a unique program that combines dance and language. Reporter Abby Coleman from our NBC affiliate WSLS spoke with the teacher about how putting a little rhythm in your life is a good lesson for everyone.
These fourth graders at Highland Park Elementary School are learning to salsa their way through sentences. With a passion for rhythm and a heart full of cultural pride, dance teacher Pedro Soleil is transforming the lives of local students through his innovative program, Dance Espanol.
English is not my first language, English is my third language. So that's the reason it's so important to encourage these dancers to be proud.
Every week, fourth graders across Roanoke City schools take dance lessons from Senor Pedro. But it's about more than dancing.
To encourage these dancers to learn other language.
Roanoke City has a large Hispanic population, which is why Pedro wants to make sure all kids feel safe sharing their heritage.
Incentive my ESL students that are coming from other countries, especially the Hispanics, to speak their language.
And for the students that may not love to dance, they're still learning skills they can take well beyond the dance floor.
Be proud of themselves and self-esteem, teamwork.
For you as a teacher, what is it like to look out on all these kids and see how confident they are already just 3 weeks in?
It's so wonderful to see how they pride themselves and they have the identity for themselves. They're not copy each other, they're themselves. And it's so wonderful. They can be leaders in the next generation.
For Pedro, dance speaks every language.
Because every country is different, but we speak the same language.
Abby Coleman, thank you for that report. Stay with us. A lot of news ahead. You're watching NBC News Daily. You can watch free 24/7 on our streaming network, NBC News. Now, we made this whole graphic for you so you could find all of the different places you can watch NBC News Daily. You can take us on the go with YouTube, Hulu, Roku, and Peacock, Fire TV as well, Fubo, all of those places. Your news continues right after this.
News lives in the now.
The front lines are still very active. This is like quicksand, and officials say an entire town is cut off.
This close to actually understand why people had to jump in the ocean.
News for the generation of now is NBC News Now.
Lester Holt, America's most trusted TV news anchor.
Get the latest updates on the 2024 election on the NBC News app.
Lester Holt, America's most trusted TV news anchor.
天啊！
Welcome back. It is 12:30 in State College, Pennsylvania, and right here in New York City. I'm Vicki Nguyen. Here's what's making news right now. At least 23 people are dead, more than a dozen hospitalized after an explosion and school bus fire in Bangkok, Thailand today. It happened when a group of students and teachers were on a school field trip. Police are still investigating the cause of that fire and looking for the bus driver who reportedly fled the scene. Sean Steins, the Kentucky sheriff accused of fatally shooting a judge inside his chambers last month, he's stepping down effective immediately, according to a statement from his lawyers. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear's office told Steins he had to resign or face removal. Steins pleaded not guilty to the murder last week. Today, a historic celebration in America as Jimmy Carter turns 100 years old. The first former president to reach this milestone. Carter's been in hospice care at his home in Georgia for the past 19 months, but he says he wants to hang on until October 15th when he can cast his vote for fellow Democrat Kamala Harris in the general election. Well, there is growing frustration in the wake of Hurricane Helene. Communities slammed by the powerful storm are criticizing local and government responses. Helene killed more than 100 people, and many of those deaths are in North Carolina. Dozens in the state are also reported missing, or they're stranded in areas that have been cut off by debris, flooding, and mudslides. Aid groups are working to deliver supplies by air, truck, and even mule to hard-hit areas, but locals say it's too little, too late. NBC News correspondent George Solis joins me from Asheville, where the mayor said the city is in crisis mode at this hour. So, George, General Russell Honore, who coordinated the military relief efforts during Hurricane Katrina, told NBC that more boots should be on the ground, including military helicopters, to save people who are stranded. Why have we not seen a bigger response?
Yeah, there is a big mobilization happening here, and a lot of it is unfortunately moving a little bit too slow for the residents here. At least that's what they tell me. But nevertheless, we have talked to officials here. We've talked to FEMA here who say, listen, we're on the ground here. We are trying to get to you as fast as we can. As we know, one of the biggest challenges has been that cell service, and it has been coming back up in certain areas, but they're still relying on people to let people know where these resources need to go. I pressed the FEMA administrator yesterday asking her, listen, are you going to make a commitment to go to every single one of these neighborhoods that was impacted? And she says, yes, they have 1,200 members here on the ground trying to work with those local and state resources that are here and coming into this region to help all of these residents that are impacted. This is a crisis. It is a catastrophe. Among the biggest needs here right now, water. That seems to be the biggest thing that we are hearing from these residents. And where we are right now, this is a water distribution site. That is a $6,000 gallon tanker over there that has been used to fill up all of these bladders. That's what they're called here. There is a limit of 2 right now to make sure everyone can get some. What we're seeing is people taking some to people that cannot leave their homes right now or can't really get to this site at this moment. So that is the sense of community. We're also seeing people lining up here to volunteer their time to help one another, because this town, if there's one thing I can tell you over the last several days, is the resiliency. They are trying to share as many resources as possible as supplies are running out until all of those federal resources can get here on the ground and mobilize to get to help these people that desperately need so much. It is a very dire situation. A lot of people, of course, feeling that squeeze, that desperation, as they still feel cut off from the rest of the world. But again, we are learning that these resources are on the ground, and they may just take some time to actually get mobilized. But nevertheless, help is on the way.
We can see the hard work on the ground there behind you. You've been in Asheville talking with locals and business owners, too, who are also struggling to find food. Are there health concerns at this point?
Definitely some. So I'll tell you, we were at the River Arts District yesterday, which was completely flooded. It is completely destroyed, and there are fumes. There are gas spills that happen in those waters from some propane tanks that were in that region. So at one point, there was a little bit of sense of nausea from me just being in that area. But there are some health concerns, again, just compounding and adding to the difficulties and challenges here, Vicki.
All right, George Solis, live in North Carolina for us. Thank you. We are now just hours away from the first and potentially the only vice presidential debate right here in New York City. This will be the first time Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz have ever met face-to-face. This could be the last debate we even see before the election. It is just 35 days away. This is a critical moment for both campaigns, with polls showing a dead heat. Walz gave reporters a thumbs up as he arrived in New Jersey. You see that video just from this morning. And last night in Manhattan, the DNC controlled the Trump-Vance campaign by projecting "Go Coach Walz" on Trump Tower. NBC News senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Hake is live here with me on set. Good to see you, Garrett. So let's talk about what Vance and Walz need to accomplish tonight. What are their strategies? How will their approaches differ?
Well, they both need to remember it's not about them. That as the vice presidential nominee, your role is to do not.
好，我们讲话。然后有可见声音有在里面，为什么？我已经把声音关掉了。我把我的。
J.D. Vance to be very aggressive on the issues of immigration and inflation, sort of the two issues that have been most animating for the Trump campaign so far.
It will be great to see these two men on stage. In your experience, though, does this, Garrett, move the needle either way in an election when the vice presidents go up against each other?
Not often. I think if most people, if you remember anything about the last vice presidential debate, it's probably what? It's probably the fly that landed on Mike Pence's head, right? It's that meme is the thing that most people remember. It is rare that these things move the needle, but this is going to be such a close race. Anything might matter on the margins.
All right, Garrett Hake, live with me on set. Thank you so much.
You bet.
We're going to take a quick pause now for breaking news. Stand by for an NBC News special report.
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good day. We are coming on the air with breaking news from the Middle East. NBC News has just confirmed that Iran launched a ballistic missile attack against Israel that began moments ago. Those missiles heading directly toward Israel right now, anticipated to reach its territory in just a matter of minutes. These are live pictures of Tel Aviv, where in the last few moments we heard sirens wailing throughout the city, air raid sirens. The U.S. Embassy in Israel is directing all U.S. government employees and their families to take shelter and prepare to enter bomb shelters. U.S. officials say that Iran is expected to target military and government sites in Israel and not civilians. This attack comes less than 24 hours after Israel began what it's calling a limited ground operation inside southern Lebanon. They say their goal is to target the Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah. Israel killed the leader of that terror organization, which is closely linked to Iran, on Friday. Let's go now to NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez in northern Israel on the Lebanese border. What are you seeing and hearing from there, Raf?
Lester, in just the last couple of minutes, smartphones all across Israel have vibrated with a stark message from the Israeli military. Iran has launched missiles towards Israel. U.S. officials warned earlier that Iran was preparing a ballistic missile attack. That is significant because it takes just 12 minutes for ballistic missiles fired from Iran to reach Israel. At this point, we are not yet seeing any sign. Oh, Lester, in just as I speak to you, we are seeing air defenses fired off in northern Israel. It is unclear if they are intercepting those Iranian missiles or if this is rocket fire heading from Lebanon. Lester,
Raf, are you here? The
sirens are not going.
Okay, we heard the sirens a moment ago. We're seeing what these apparent missiles or rockets now in the air approaching or seem to be going over the heart of Tel Aviv. Are you hearing the telltale sound of the Iron Dome intercepting any of these missiles, Raf?
Lester, if you can hear me, we all the way up on the Israeli border with Lebanon are seeing flashes in the skies up here. It is not clear at this point if these are Israeli Iron Dome interceptors or if these are the Iranian missiles that the Israeli military has warned are on their way to this country. We are seeing several streaks of light through the sky up here. We are just a couple of hundred meters from the Lebanese border. Now, Lester, we are not hearing sirens right now, but I think it is possible that they may go off any second, in which case our crew will move to the safety of the shelter down here. But Lester, this is snapping Israelis back to that moment in April when Iran fired 300 missiles, drones, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles towards Israel. That barrage was intercepted by a combination of Israeli air power, but also American military forces across the Middle East who were able to shoot down the vast majority of those missiles. And people across Israel tonight will be wondering if the same can be done again. Lester, I can tell you at this moment, the skies above us are lighting up. We are seeing Israeli Iron Dome interceptors, and they appear to be shooting down some of these missiles as they streak over the skies of northern Israel in many, many directions at once, Lester. We are seeing the streaking lights of what we do believe to be these Iranian ballistic missiles potentially fired just 10 minutes ago from Iran, crossing a distance of thousands of miles and now illuminating the skies of northern Israel. And we are seeing the smaller streaks of light as these Iron Dome interceptors are going through. Lester, I can say we are seeing some of these missiles, they are either falling apart, a sign that they have been intercepted, or they are making their way down towards the ground here in northern Israel. It is just a light show unlike anything I have seen before. Lester, a really tense situation here right now.
All right, let me just reset for the viewers. What we're seeing now are the missiles, interceptors, rockets. We're not sure what these particular vehicles are. This is a view from cameras in Tel Aviv right now. You can see some of the impacts. Typically what happens, the Iron Dome explodes, destroys the incoming missile, but those pieces still come down and they can be lethal. As we watch this view again over Tel Aviv, and you see what appear to be impacts now on the ground. Flashes on the ground indicating that some of these are reaching targets, whether the intended target or not, reaching some sort of a target. While we look at this picture, I want to go to Richard. Here's some of it now. Let's go to Richard Engel now. He's in Tyre in southern Lebanon. What are you seeing there?
Well, there is a lot of activity in the sky here as well. I think you can see some of these flashes of light. We are obviously in Lebanon. We are not inside Israel, but we are in southern Lebanon, very close to the Israeli border, not very far from where Raf is right now. And it appears to be a counter campaign to either stop Hezbollah firing or to stop the incoming Iranian missiles. But what we are seeing here is something that is completely unusual in Lebanon, unusual in this conflict. I would say that this is part of a coordinated response to try and stop the Iranian missiles from flying into northern Israel, and also to try and shut down Hezbollah at the same time. So what I think we're seeing on both sides of the border right now is a response. Air defense systems in action to stop the Iranian incoming fire and to stop Hezbollah. So this is a massive campaign, a massive amount of air defenses. Lester, what Iran has just done in the last few minutes is an extraordinarily risky move. Many people believe that Iran felt that it had no choice but to launch ballistic missiles or to launch some sort of attack against Israel because Iran has been in such a weak position recently. Iran projects power through its proxies. Iran's main proxies are Hamas in Gaza, Hamas in Gaza has been effectively dismantled, its military capacity destroyed. It is still launching a guerrilla campaign against Israeli soldiers. The cost to the people of Gaza has been tremendous. And its other main proxy, its much bigger, more powerful proxy, is here in Lebanon, Hezbollah, and it is being systematically dismantled by Israel. So Iran, many people said, while losing its proxies one after another, felt that it had to react. Otherwise, its other proxies, and it still has backers in Syria, in Iraq, and in Yemen, would think that Iran is a paper tiger, that its threats don't mean anything. But what we're seeing in Israel and in Lebanon is that at this stage, it seems that there has been a massive response, air defense response on both sides of the border to shut down Hezbollah, shut down that Iranian attack. We will see, perhaps in the coming minutes, if any of those ballistic missiles got through this incredible net and caused damage. But
Richard,
just as most people aren't necessarily familiar with ballistic missiles, each one is about the size of a passenger bus.
All right, Richard, stand by there because I want to get a sense of what we're looking at now. We're seeing a picture on our screen from Tel Aviv. You are just over in Lebanon right now. Can you tell me, presumably the inbound missiles are coming from Iran. Are there Hezbollah missiles being fired from where you are?
From where I am, we have mostly been seeing interceptions, high-level explosions, high-level interceptions. We have not heard any launches from this city. We are in southern Lebanon. This is the area that Israel is now trying to create as a buffer zone. This is the area where an Israeli ground offensive is underway, somewhat closer to the Israeli border than we are right now. But this is the Hezbollah stronghold that Israel is trying to dismantle. But from where we are, no, we have not heard any Hezbollah rocket or missile fire leaving from this area. Just these explosions at quite a high altitude, so high that we couldn't hear the impacts, couldn't hear the explosions, but we saw them exploding quite high above us, which is why I believe that this was a very sophisticated weapon system in action to try and stop both the Iranian system or Iranian missiles and anything else that may have been coming toward Israel from Lebanon.
All right, Richard, I'm going to ask you to stand by. Let me go back to Raf Sanchez. Raf, explain where you are. You're still seeing that light show that you had described earlier?
So, Lester, we are just south of the Lebanese border, and I can tell you the skies are once again inky black. We are no longer seeing either what we suspect were those Iranian missiles, nor Israeli Iron Dome interceptors in the skies. It did look from where we were that some of those missiles potentially either impacted in northern Israel or they intercepted and broke apart quite close to the ground. But at this time, the skies are dark. We are not seeing any sign of these missiles. As we said, ballistic missiles, 12 minutes or so, fired from Iran to Israel. We certainly know that Israel's air defenses were in action right now. What we do not know at this point is whether Israeli, American, British, potentially Arab fighter jets across the Middle East had time in that short window to take down any of those incoming ballistic missiles. It is very possible that the lights we saw streaking across the sky were just a fraction of what could have been a much, much larger barrage. I want to tell you, Lester, our colleagues who are in Israel and other parts of, who are in Tel Aviv and other parts of central Israel are telling us that they heard loud explosions where they were. Again, it's not clear if that is a sign of missiles impacting or if that was Iron Dome interceptions happening overhead. I'm looking down at my phone. At this point, we don't have anything official about casualties or impacts from the Israeli military, but I can tell you they gave us just a one-line statement saying sirens sounded all across Israel. You were seeing on your screen the Dome of the Rock in the Old City in Jerusalem. the third holiest site in Islam at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the holiest site for Jews, the Temple Mount. And it appears that the sky is not just over northern Israel, not just over Tel Aviv, but over the holy city of Jerusalem, also earlier filled with missiles as those Iranian projectiles came from the east. So we are waiting at this point to see if there are any reports of injuries, of casualties, of fatalities. But Lester, we are able to cast ahead that the last time this happened in April, it caused minimal damage in Israel, and Israel responded with a very, very small, almost surgical strike against Iran. How Israel decides to respond tonight will be dependent on the scale of the damage caused by these Iranian missiles, something that at this point we are just not able to assess. Lester.
And Raf, so I'm correct, the understanding is that the U.S. was the first to notify Israel of this likely attack tonight.
Yes, that's right, Lester. So the first that Israeli citizens heard of this was the chief spokesman of the Israeli military going up on national television and telling the Israeli public that U.S. intelligence agencies had passed information to their Israeli counterparts that an Iranian missile attack was imminent. Of course, Israel and the United States, military partners, diplomatic partners, but also intelligence partners. There is an enormous flow of information back and forth between the two. And it does appear in this instance it was the United States that first detected this movement inside Iran, indicating an imminent ballistic missile strike. And again, Lester, it does appear that American intelligence was accurate. This was not, as far as we know, a strike involving drones or cruise missiles, which could take hours to reach Israel. This was ballistic missiles. There was just a couple of minutes in between the launch in Iran to them arriving. Lester, I am seeing what appears to be another Iron Dome interceptor in the sky. Apart from that, the skies are quiet. We are not hearing sirens. What is interesting, Lester, in this position, it looks like over Tel Aviv there are more interceptors in action. Now, that could be an indication of a second wave of Iranian missiles, or it could be just some that were further on behind. I can tell you, Lester, from where we are, just a couple of hundred meters from the Lebanese border, we have been hearing outgoing Israeli artillery rounds all evening as Israel fires into southern Lebanon at Hezbollah positions. Those have gone totally silent in the last hour or so, an indication that they seem to have paused those artillery strikes as they brace. Lester, we are once again seeing the skies lighting up now. Many what appear to be these missiles streaking on a straight trajectory towards the southern central section of Israel.
Ralph?
And we are seeing the Iron Dome, which fires in a kind of cobra arc, streaking up to intercept them. We are seeing more missiles at this time, Lester.
Yeah, Raf, first of all, and I think you know this, go to shelter if you feel you need to at any point as we watch. We were looking at the other camera from Tel Aviv. We saw a limited number of projectiles there moving the screen, and now we see more here. The sirens are going off. I don't know what they're going off where you are or if we're hearing this from our camera in Tel Aviv. But nonetheless, there appears to be a second round here with the Iron Dome rockets trying to engage. We should go back a year, October 7th, that attack staged from Gaza into Israel. There were simply so many rockets, it overwhelmed the Iron Dome projectiles. And you saw one blow up right there in flight. But as you note, we note that these something still comes down. These projectiles are very heavy. I've seen it for myself. A lot of shrapnel hits the ground, but you see the explosions in the skies. Those would indicate, suggest that those are Iron Dome explosions. And when you hear it, you usually hear a boom and then a boom boom as they are taken out and continue to fall as debris to the ground below. People in Israel have been bracing for this. Again, as Raf has been reporting, the U.S. Intelligence was the first to detect the likely and anticipated launch, notified Israel, and made comments to the press as well that this was likely to occur. A retaliatory attack on a scale that appears to be considerably larger than one we saw in April in retaliation for an Israeli strike on the Iranian consulate in Damascus, Syria. This, again, appears to be two separate barrages. You see now a single weapon going up there, another one coming beneath it. Again, this could be an attempt to overwhelm the defenses of of Israel. In this case, we were told that they would have fighter jets as well that were able to intercept some of these, but it's a fairly short flight time, about 12 minutes from launching pads in Iran to Israel. So not a lot of time to respond here, but a second wave. We're no longer hearing the sirens on the ground, but clearly there's still some activity. Richard Engel is inside Lebanon with a different view for us. Tell us what you're seeing and hearing, Richard.
Well, we are in southern Lebanon, and there is definitely a second wave. We are still seeing it here. And I think based on the reporting that I'm doing, the reporting that Raf is doing just on the opposite side of the border, we're getting a sense of the flight pattern. It seems that some of these ballistic missiles heading toward Israel are going through Lebanese airspace and are being intercepted above Lebanon. So if you watch, we're seeing these high altitude explosions. One just looked up over the If you miss them, they're very quick. They look like starbursts as the rockets or missiles streak through the sky and then are being intercepted. This second wave, I would say, was as intense as the first wave. They were separated by only a few minutes. This second wave appears to be dying down right now. We'll know much more when we hear from the Pentagon, where they're able to look at the satellite imagery. But based on what we're seeing with our own eyes, what Raf is seeing just on the opposite side of the border, what our cameras are capturing, you can get a sense of the direction that these missiles are flying and how many there are. If these are all indeed ballistic missiles, this is a much greater attack than we saw in April, a much larger scale. But so far, it seems that the U.S., Israeli, whoever else might be involved in defending the skies over these two countries seem to be very effective, because for almost every streak that we see coming in one direction, there is another air defense system penetrating it and blowing it up. Lester, these are extraordinary times, and I can't stress that there could be enormous consequences for Iran, enormous consequences for the entire region based on what is happening here, even if these missiles don't get through and cause significant damage in Israel. And you can see another one burning and streaking through the sky right there.
Yeah, some being intercepted, perhaps Iron Dome, perhaps by weapons from fighter aircraft. We'll know at some point. I should point out that the first
alert... It wouldn't be Iron Dome here.
Yeah, of course. And Richard, and I know you have this, and many people who are in Israel have an app on their phones to alert. And I got a couple here. It simply says rocket attack Tel Aviv city center. We got that before that initial wave, and then the sirens went off. But this is a country, of course, that is always on edge to a certain extent for the threats from its neighbors, and in this case, people brace for this retaliatory attack, again coming in multiple waves tonight and far larger than what we witnessed in April. I want to go to our Pentagon correspondent, Courtney Kube. Courtney, as we pointed out, the U.S. was aware, intelligence had pointed to the fact there would be an attack tonight. Why did the U.S. want to go out and release that ahead of this?
So it could have been as a potential deterrent. We've seen the U.S. do that in the past, where they put out intelligence, they'll declassify it so that they can potentially deter an action coming. We specifically saw that in Ukraine. Well, it doesn't appear, if that was the motivation here, Lester, it doesn't appear that that's worked. What the U.S. was expecting to see, and I will say, according to conversations that we've been having over the last several hours, this is playing out very similarly to how officials have told us they were expecting it to be. So several hundred ballistic missiles appear to have been launched at Israel. What we've been told all along is the expectation is it would be government and military targets as opposed to civilian facilities or civilian areas. Now, that being said, as you well know, Lester, targeting anything inside Israel always has the potential for some sort of a civilian repercussion. Not only the potential dangers that if something is intercepted, that there could that shrapnel and large pieces could fall on civilians below, but just that the targeting isn't always perfect. Now, we have seen these ballistic missile launches. The U.S. and the Israelis and other potential partners in the region have been preparing for this. And in fact, we've talked a lot about April here and the Iranian attack on Israel in April. That was more than 300 projectiles that were fired in waves, various different things, everything from cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, down to slow-moving drones and loitering munitions were fired in over the course of hours. U.S. officials were not expecting this to look exactly like that. They thought this would be primarily ballistic missiles with the potential for some other smaller or even slower systems here. So far, we haven't seen any of those. They also were expecting the majority of the fire to come from Iran. They were not ruling out the possibility of some of the militia groups and proxy groups like the Houthis to fire missiles or other things as well. Again, it's not clear where all of these launches have come from, but the U.S. and allies have been preparing. In fact, the U.S. military has more assets in the region than they did during that attack in April from Iran. So this includes the U.S. has ground-based and sea-based radars that within seconds of the launch of a ballistic missile, they know that it's in the air and they can get a sense of where it may be impacting so that they can potentially intercept. Israel also has some similar capabilities in the region. So as Raf was saying, it could be minutes from launch to potential impact in Israel, but the U.S. and the Israelis and other allies in the region will know that, and they'll be able to fire off any various kinds of interceptors. The U.S. has ballistic missile destroyers, systems that can fire interceptors, take out these missiles before they even frankly get into Israeli airspace in some cases. But the U.S. also has other things in the region, so think about where some of these missiles would be flying over, as we were just hearing from Richard. The U.S. has air defense systems in some of those partner areas in Saudi Arabia.
我应该要以哪一个声音或是画面为主
that could also have been employed there. And then, of course, there's the air assets that you mentioned, Lester. They have U.S. fighter jets. Frankly, all throughout the region, they've even bolstered some of those capabilities in recent days and weeks. They have the ability to shoot down some of these projectiles as they are coming in. It really was a layered defense here that exists. But again, we're still waiting for any kind of a battle damage assessment, any sense of whether any were able to actually impact in Israel, and how much the U.S. and allies were able to shoot down and with what assets.
没有，我听没声音。我要对 Meet 讲话还是 Zoom？
Retaliatory attack directly
Zoom 不应该讲
on
话。
Iran.
我想哦。
Israel was the one who responded with strikes inside Iran, you'll recall. Just based off of the language that we've been hearing, not even just in the last hours, but over the last months, the U.S. is very quick to say that they will defend Israel, but at the end of the day, I could see more of an Israeli response here against Iran than a U.S. one.
All right, Courtney, thank you. As you look at the screen there on your left, Tyre, Lebanon, a little after 8 in the evening. This is very close to the Israeli border on the right. That's the view from Tel Aviv. Notable in both pictures right now, the skies appear to be calm after what appeared to be 2 waves of attacks of either rockets or ballistic missiles or a combination of both. I want to go to our senior White House correspondent, Gabe Gutierrez. Gabe, what is the White House position? What's happening right now in the West Wing?
Hi there, Lester. Well, it's been a busy morning here at the White House. The president was briefed early this morning, and just a short time ago, we heard that the president had convened a meeting with his national security team, along with the vice president, to discuss the status of U.S. preparations in the region and also the status of helping Israel defend against attack and protect U.S. personnel. Now, on that point, Lester, earlier today, the State Department had directed all U.S. government employees and their family members in Israel and the surrounding areas to shelter in place. Now, earlier today, we had heard from a senior White House official that the Biden administration did anticipate that this attack could include more firepower than the attack that you were discussing with Courtney in April. At this point, it appears that is the case. But and he has repeatedly said that he would like to see a ceasefire here, while at the same time emphasizing the need for Israel to defend itself. So the White House walking a very tightrope here politically, Lester.
All right, Gabe, thank you. What you're looking at was video taken a little bit ago of some of those rockets and/or ballistic missiles descending toward Israel. We saw a lot of explosions in the sky indicating they had been intercepted, but of course that doesn't stop debris and in some cases lethal debris from falling to the ground. And you can see one of the interceptors launching on the left there, trying to take out these missiles before they can do maximum damage. Let me bring in Meet the Press moderator Kristen Welker. Kristen, we've been talking from a military angle what the U.S. can do and what it might do, but this is also a political question. Can you talk about that for us?
Well, Lester, think about the extent to which this may reshape the debate tonight between the vice presidential candidate, Senator J.D. Vance, and Governor Tim Walz. Foreign policy will now be in focus, and the crisis in the Middle East specifically. Former President Donald Trump already out with a statement saying, quote, "The world is on fire and spiraling out of control. We have no leadership, no one running the country." That will clearly be a theme that we will hear from Senator J.D. Vance on the debate stage tonight when both candidates are pressed on what they would do in an administration to deal with what is unfolding right now. Here's the thing, though, Lester, it will put the Trump foreign policy in the Middle East in focus. It will put the Biden foreign policy in the Middle East in focus. Remember, under former President Donald Trump, he ripped up the Iran nuclear deal, said he would get a better deal. That never happened. U.S. officials now saying Iran is closer to developing a nuclear weapon in the wake of that. So all of this will be at play, and again, I think reshape the conversation, not just on the debate stage, Lester, but on the campaign trail as well. And think about how much foreign policy has really come into the spotlight in the wake of the October 7th attacks a year ago. So obviously, it will be yet again another flashpoint tonight, Lester.
All right, Kristen Welker, thank you. Let me bring in our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, once more from Tyre, Lebanon. Richard, I understand there's been some reaction, some statement from the Iranians.
The Iranians have just issued a statement explaining why they launched this response. Iran, just a short while ago, said that this attack, which it launched at the heart of the enemy, was Iran's response to Israel's killing of the Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh, who was assassinated by Israel in Tehran, and that this was also the response to the Israel's, again, killing of the Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah, a few days ago, and another Iran Revolutionary Guard leader. So this, Iran says, is its combined response to the killing of several of its allied leaders, several leaders of Iranian proxies. So we're now seeing what Iran justification for this attack was, and Iran said if Israel responds, it will face a crushing assault, a crushing defeat. So Iran is saying why it did it and threatening to respond with more attacks should Israel choose to respond. And I'm very confident that Israel will choose to respond to this. The only question is how severe that response will be.
Richard, thank you. 2 waves of inbound missiles and rockets that we've witnessed here this evening, broken up by about 5 or 6 minutes. This is the pictures from a bit earlier. We've been watching the skyline of Tel Aviv, also that view from where Richard is in Tyre, Lebanon, to see if this is the end of this attack and the defense. We don't know if there have been any casualties. We saw what appeared to be a number of these rockets or missiles make ground impact, or at least appear to make ground impact. Could be just they hit very low to the ground. But a number of them also appear to have been intercepted either by the Iron Dome, which is famously used by Israel, or fighter aircraft or other forms of interceptors used to defend Israel from this attack. It's hard to know exactly where these are landing. Let's go to Raf Sanchez right now. Raf, are you getting any word, any indication of casualties or what has been hit tonight?
So, Lester, I've just been texting with the Israeli military spokesman. He is saying that there have been sirens going off basically all across this country, that nearly all 9 million people inside Green Line, Israel, have been told at various points to head to shelters. At this moment, there is no word on impacts or casualties. The Israeli military is advising the public that the explosions they've been hearing are either interceptions or the sounds of missiles hitting in the earth. So they seem to be, oh, Lester, there is an Iron Dome fairly close to us now. All right, Lester, that's the sirens. We're going to head to safety.
All right. Raf Sanchez, thank you very much. The sirens, this is the 3rd time we have heard them sound tonight after what appear to be 2 waves of attacks. We can't see, I don't know if that camera can move, but we're watching right now. Clearly, Raf and his team heard the sirens, and they have a designated place to go to take shelter, as most people do